400,000 stolen Social Security numbers. 400,000. That's not a glitch. That's not routine system maintenance. That's a digital smash and grab on a scale no mainstream network would dare whisper, unless it had a Trump name attached to it. But here's the kicker. This heist didn't target the rich or powerful. No, it siphoned the identities of everyday Americans. Your grandma, your cousin, the trucker down the interstate, and the money tied to those identities, it didn't disappear. It got recycled, cleaned, polished, and rerouted into the silk-lined pockets of America's so-called public servants. One name rose to the top faster than inflation under Bidenomics: Nancy Pelosi. This is not a tale of cybercrime. This is the opening scene of a takedown, and it all started with a no-name IT grunt at the Social Security Administration. A guy who noticed the numbers weren't adding up, literally. One moment he's staring at a spreadsheet, the next he's staring down a formal suspension letter and an NDA thicker than a California tax code. Before they locked him out, he whispered to a former colleague on a secure line, "I found something. This isn't random. It's organized, deliberate. I don't think they're just stealing identities. I think they're laundering the country." The voice on the other end hesitated, then replied, "You're going to need someone bigger than us, someone untouchable." The USB, marked only with a crude red X, changed hands twice. The final delivery was discreet, no ceremony. Just a quiet knock at a gate in Texas, a drop, and a disappearing tail light. It landed where it was meant to, with Elon Musk. Elon had been off the radar, half myth, half exile, after refusing to play censorship games with the political elite. They wanted to destroy him. He built rockets instead. But even dragons sleep with one eye open. "What's this?" he muttered, holding the USB between two fingers like it might bite. The engineer who delivered it didn't flinch. "Let's just say, it has Pelosi's signature, not ink, data." Elon didn't need more encouragement. He plugged it in. His AI rig, black screen terminal code running like a heartbeat, hummed to life. No animation, no flair, just numbers, patterns, names. "Talk to me," Elon whispered to the machine. And the machine answered, with a trail of funds arcing like an electric storm across NGO accounts, shell companies, nonprofits that looked more like luxury laundering stations. Community development, gender equity, refugee relief. Elon read aloud, eyebrows raised. More like beachfront condos, private jets, and wine cellars in Sonoma. The map was alive, and in the center of it pulsed one tag, flashing over and over like a wound refusing to clot: Pelosi. Elon leaned back, eyes narrowed. Then came the quiet declaration, half whisper, half verdict. "So, this is how the empire pays its queens." From that moment, the countdown began, and the people who thought they were untouchable were about to find out just how fast truth travels when Elon Musk decides to hit send. Elon Musk didn't rest after that first bombshell landed. He knew that behind every number was a story, and behind every story lay a clear thread connecting taxpayer dollars to highfalutin nonprofits. So he gathered his best, a forensic accountant who could detect a hidden shell company faster than a seasoned detective, a constitutional lawyer whose principles burned brighter than any lobbyist's pocketbook, and a hard-hitting independent journalist known for exposing the dirty underbelly of Washington politics. "Let's map every cent," Elon instructed as he stared at the glowing data on his monitor. "I want to know where each dollar started, how it moved, and exactly who is getting richer off our system." The team dove into the data. They traced the money flowing from USAID grants, filtering through countless transactions until one figure emerged as a glaring anomaly. One particular NGO had received over $11 million. But that wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The accountant explained, "This NGO funnels nearly 80% of its funds to what appears to be a sister organization. But here's the twist. They share the same street address as the Pelosi Foundation." His tone was even, but the implications were explosive. It's as if they wanted the world to think these were two separate entities, when in reality, they're one and the same. The lawyer chimed in, "And it doesn't stop there. We've uncovered a property in Napa Valley, purchased under the guise of the Community Gender Training Enterprise, an organization that, when you look into it, has no staff, no operations, nothing but a bank account and a fancy title. She laughed dryly. Training grapes to be progressive, perhaps? Meanwhile, the journalist laid out the next piece of evidence. Listen to this. Leaked footage from an NGO branded as Environmental Justice shows a private jet in full swing, she said, her voice low yet fervent. That jet wasn't ferrying humanitarian aid. It was shuttling Pelosi's daughter and her entourage on luxury trips to Europe. The file notes label it as a climate advocacy retreat. That's a euphemism, plain and simple, for jet setting on the taxpayer's dime. Elon leaned back, the weight of the evidence reflected in his narrowed eyes. They're not hiding it, he murmured to himself. They're parading it like it's some badge of honor. The truth is so glaring that even a child could see the connection if they were paying attention. Every piece of the puzzle now formed a damning picture. A network of nonprofits, ostensibly dedicated to promoting social good, that instead served as the conduits for laundering public funds. These organizations created an elaborate financial labyrinth designed to hide the true beneficiaries behind layers of bogus transactions and phony initiatives. The team's findings were as clear as they were scandalous. Pelosi's foundation wasn't just associated with these shady transfers. It was at the very epicenter of them. The financial data, the property records, the leaked jet manifests, all converged on a single conclusion. The empire of supposed community service was nothing more than a sophisticated money trail leading back to Pelosi's inner circle. As we peel back these layers, the journalist remarked with a wry smile, it's almost as if they expected the public to applaud them for every dollar that got reinvested into local charity without noticing that every reinvestment enriched someone's private bank account. Elon's reply was measured yet seething with determination. This isn't about petty theft. It's about dismantling a system of hypocrisy where even the highest echelons of power can hide their greed behind buzzwords and bureaucratic jargon. They're betting that the complexity will keep the public in the dark, but complexity is their undoing. And with that, the team's mission became clear. Expose the absurdity, call out the duplicity, and remind everyone that while the facade of community development might be decorated with warm slogans, underneath lay a cold, calculated system built to funnel money to those who dared to call themselves untouchable. The investigation had reached a tipping point. As the evidence mounted, the quiet murmur of dissent grew into a roar, a promise that the next chapter was coming, one where every cover-up would be unmasked, every transaction scrutinized, and every word of empty rhetoric challenged. The evidence was overwhelming. The money trails were airtight. And the cherry on top? A freshly leaked audio file where two NGO executives, caught mid-brunch and mid-scheme, casually discussed how best to funnel clean-looking money to the right people, without drawing eyes from the hill. One of them even laughed and said, "It's not laundering if it smells like justice." That clip alone earned 5 million views in under 2 hours. 6 million if you counted the TikTok remix version, layered over dramatic violin music and slow zooms on Pelosi's face. Elon Musk, however, wasn't interested in virality. He wanted blood. Quietly, methodically, he packaged the encrypted files, NGO grant audits, tax filings, internal communications, jet flight manifests, and of course the audio, and hand-delivered them to a name not heard much since the Trump administration, Pam Bondi. Now serving as Attorney General of the United States, Bondi was a courtroom tactician with the rhetorical grace of a cobra in heels. She'd spent the last few years stockpiling sealed files, classified leads, and unopened cases that, coincidentally, never saw the light of day. Cases that made certain donors sweat and certain swamp creatures squirm. When Bondi saw the files, she reportedly smiled and said, "Well, looks like it's time to shake the dust off the subpoenas." What followed was political whiplash. Social media erupted. Hashtags like NGO Gate, Pelosi Pipeline, and Climate Cash Scam trended faster than you could say Equity Initiative. The corporate press scrambled, half of them pretending it wasn't happening, the other half trying to reframe the story as an unfair attack on public service. But the public wasn't buying it. The people had seen the receipts, literally, A climate nonprofit that paid for luxury retreats? A gender awareness group with no staff but 4 Teslas? A food justice initiative that registered its HQ at a beachfront mansion in Napa? Americans might be forgiving, but they're not blind. Pressure began building. Talk radio lit up. Congressional voicemails overloaded. Eventually, James Comer, chair of the House Oversight Committee, did what any reluctant Republican surrounded by torch-wielding taxpayers would do. He approved a special congressional hearing on NGO misuse and possible corruption by elected officials. In layman's terms, the circus was coming to town, and Pelosi would be front row, center ring. Under the spotlight she could no longer control, of course, Pelosi didn't blink. No stranger to scandal, she took to the cameras, wearing her signature smirk like it was stitched by Chanel. "They'll regret dragging me into this mud," she declared, chin high. The press nodded, dutifully typing what they were told like stenographers with better suits. But while she spun the narrative, Elon didn't even blink. He didn't call a press conference. He didn't appear on cable news. He simply logged into X and posted 6 words that hit harder than any indictment. "Looking forward to seeing you, madam." And with that, the battle lines were drawn. The most powerful woman in Congress was about to step into the very arena she thought she'd mastered. Only this time, she wasn't holding the gavel. Elon was. The air inside the congressional chamber was thin, not from lack of oxygen, but from the weight of expectation. Every seat was taken, every lens focused, every smartphone live streaming. This wasn't just another hearing. This was the hearing. National broadcast. Global interest. One man, one woman, and one empire of questions. The camera lights bounced off polished oak and polished egos. MSNBC, Fox, CNN, OANN. They were all there, side by side in rare bipartisan unity, drooling for sound bites. Staffers whispered, anchors rehearsed intros, and the committee chair cleared his throat for the 6th time, trying to look neutral and failing. Then, without escort, without entourage, Elon Musk entered the room. No handshake, no nod. Just a silent walk down the aisle, hands in pockets, suit charcoal black and sharp as a blade. He moved like a man who didn't come to play defense and didn't need to. Some said he looked tired. Others said he looked dangerous. They were both right. He took his seat at the center table, the witness chair, and looked straight ahead, not at the cameras, not at the politicians, but somewhere deeper, somewhere they couldn't reach. Moments later, Nancy Pelosi made her entrance, in a tailored white blazer, designer scarf, and that signature smirk that had weathered 1,000 press conferences and at least 5 federal investigations. Her allies clapped. A few even stood, a soft ripple of stage-managed respect. Elon didn't move. He didn't even blink. She passed by him slowly, glancing sideways, and offered a line rehearsed to perfection, voice sweet like cyanide. "It's good to see our tech titans still find time to cosplay as patriots." A few on the Democratic side chuckled. The CNN anchor scribbled the line into her notepad with visible relief. Finally, a Pelosi zinger. But Elon didn't laugh. He tilted his head slightly, met her gaze, and said nothing. The chair banged his gavel. The hearing was called to order. "This session," he declared, "is convened to examine potential misuse of federal funds by non-governmental organizations receiving USAID grants. The committee recognizes Mr. Elon Musk as the first witness." There was a pause. 1,000 lenses zoomed in. Elon leaned forward, just slightly, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it cut through the chamber like a drone through fog. "I didn't come here for politics. I came because 400,000 Americans had their identities stolen, because money meant for food, housing, safety, was redirected through organizations with nice logos and zero oversight, because someone at this table knows where that money went." The room stilled. Pelosi blinked, but only once. She folded her arms like a queen awaiting amusement, but the edges of her lips twitched, just barely. Elon continued, "I'm not here to throw accusations. I'm here to present facts. And if the facts happen to make some people uncomfortable, well," he shrugged, "that's how you know they're real." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a slim file. One sheet. No theatrics. No binder the size of a Bible, just a single page with enough detail to turn the tone in the room from smug to stillborn. He slid it across the table without a word. Start there, he said. Then ask yourselves why a training nonprofit with no employees owns a villa in Napa and flew a congresswoman's daughter across the Atlantic. On your dime. Pelosi's smile didn't break, but her jaw set tighter. The hearing had begun, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't the one asking the questions. Elon didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight of what he was about to unveil did all the shouting for him. He tapped his tablet once. Behind him on the massive congressional screen, the first image appeared. A simple flow chart. Stark, clean, devastating. Let's talk structure, he said calmly. Money from USAID was granted to NGOA. A new node blinked on screen. NGOA transferred those funds within 48 hours to NGOB. Another node. A new line. NGOB contracted a consulting firm based in San Francisco. That firm is owned by the cousin of the founder of NGOA. They used it to pay for. Let's see. A strategic equity audit of a school district in Arizona that doesn't exist. Chuckles rippled through the chamber, except from Pelosi's side, where knuckles tightened against polished wood. Elon continued scrolling. From there, the funds moved again, this time to a private holding company registered in Delaware, because of course it's Delaware. That company then paid for a residential property in, wait for it, Napa Valley, same zip code as a winery recently purchased by. He paused for dramatic breath, glancing sideways. A nonprofit called Community Gender Training Enterprise. Objection, Pelosi blurted, her voice rising slightly, half protest, half reflex. You're insinuating guilt by adjacency? There is no proof I have anything to do with these entities. Elon didn't even turn his head. He simply raised one brow, still scrolling. Actually, he said, tone flat as glass, I haven't said your name yet. Pelosi's lips tightened. A flicker of something passed behind her eyes. Panic? Number recognition. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Elon added. This is just the architecture. He swiped again. The screen now showed scanned invoices, dozens of them, each labeled with noble-sounding justifications. Gender Inclusivity Training Initiative, $275,000. Water sanitation deployment, $1.1 million. Uganda rural school construction, $3.4 million. Elon turned toward the committee. Here's the problem. There's no gender program. The water purification system was a single-office Brita filter bought on Amazon. The Uganda school? Satellite imagery shows an empty field, unless education now grows in grass. Nervous laughter broke out on the Republican side. Even a few centrist Democrats shifted uncomfortably. Elon zoomed in on one document. This one's my favorite, he said. A $900,000 contract paid to a consulting group called Echo First Strategies. Lists its mailing address as, he tapped again, the same office building registered to a private firm owned by the niece of Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi. Boom. You could hear a pin drop. Or maybe that was the sound of MSNBC producers quietly sobbing. Pelosi leaned forward now, her voice tighter, her phrasing clipped like a defense attorney caught without notes. That proves nothing. A relative's name on a lease doesn't implicate me. There is no direct evidence tying me to any of these organizations or their decisions. Elon, still calm, didn't miss a beat. You're right, he said. If this were court, you'd be entitled to that presumption. But this isn't court. This is Congress, and Congress demands answers, not evasions. Then more quietly, almost kindly, besides, Madam Speaker, you seem unusually defensive for someone who claims to know nothing. Her face froze. The silence that followed was heavy, not with drama, but with truth. The kind of truth that didn't need to yell. It just needed to breathe. Elon reached into his case once more. This time, he wasn't holding documents. He held a mirror. Let's get specific, he said, turning back toward the dais with surgical calm. Because I believe in math, and math doesn't negotiate. With a single tap, the main screen behind him flickered to a new slide. 2 columns side by side. Annual congressional salary, $223,500. Net worth of Nancy Pelosi. estimated between $180 million and $220 million. A quiet cough broke out in the audience. Elon didn't react. Now, I'm no IRS agent, he continued, but if you take a standard congressional salary, subtract taxes, add a modest investment portfolio, and assume zero scandal, you still can't afford 3 homes, 2 vineyards, and a stock portfolio that reads like you had a premonition of every corporate merger in the last decade. Another tap. Satellite images began to cycle. One by one, lavish properties popped up. Marin County, Georgetown, Napa. Each photo zoomed in with uncomfortable intimacy. Ownership records labeled with the names of nieces, nephews, LLCs with poetic titles like Liberty Horizons and Sunlight Collective. Elon looked up. Funny how every nonprofit committed to equity seems to own real estate in districts where even equity loans get denied. Pelosi shifted, slightly. Her fingers clutched her notes, not to read them, but to stop them from trembling. Then, with the calculation of someone who's survived worse, she fired back. "Let's be clear, Mr. Musk," she began, voice tight as a cello string. "This isn't an audit, it's a circus. And the only thing more inflated than your ego is your assumption that correlation equals culpability." Elon smiled faintly, like someone indulging a heckler who wandered onto a TED Talk. "With all due respect," he replied, "I've seen tighter accounting from high school bake sales." He turned back to the committee. "She says correlation isn't proof. But when every relative is buying property like Monopoly just ended, maybe it's not correlation. Maybe it's coordination." Just then, the chairman leaned toward his mic. "We've received new testimony," he announced. "A witness has come forward voluntarily." The side door opened. A woman walked in, early 60s, graying hair, a worn leather folder clutched in both hands like a confession. "Please state your name and relation to the case." "Carolyn Drexler," she said softly, "former lead accountant for the Central Equity Advancement Network. I worked there from 2016 to 2021. Pelosi stiffened. Elon said nothing. Carolyn opened the folder. "Over 5 fiscal years," she said, "our organization paid a consulting fee of approximately $1.2 million per year to an individual listed as Strategic Communications Advisor. That individual was Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi." A sharp intake of breath moved through the room, not a gasp, but the collective mental note of 1,000 jaws tightening. The journalist pool flinched. Several networks cut their feed, pivoting abruptly to stock footage of the Capitol and developing story banners. Pelosi's face now held no smirk, no practiced smile, only the twitch of someone who'd just seen a trap close in slow motion. "You were paid to slander me," she snapped. "You're bitter. Disgraced." "No," Carolyn replied, voice steady now. "I'm just done pretending this was anything but laundering with a LinkedIn profile." Elon folded his hands, leaned in and said, "The numbers speak, but it's the silence that follows them. That usually tells the truth." And in that silence, heavy, dry, pressurized like a room before a detonation, the tone of the hearing shifted. No more political theater. This was the beginning of reckoning. But as with any system built on illusion, you only need one crack to bring the whole cathedral down. And the next crack was already walking through the hallway outside. The temperature in the room had shifted, not with noise, but with the kind of discomfort that settles in when the wallpaper starts peeling and everyone realizes the rot's been there all along. And that's when Pelosi struck. She leaned in, voice now laced not with authority, but irritation. The tone of someone used to obedience, now tasting resistance. "Mr. Musk," she began, drawing out each syllable like it was being polished for CNN, "you've painted yourself as some taxpayer crusader. Yet let's not forget, you received billions in government subsidies to build your little toy cars and rocket ships. Funny how your moral compass only started working when it pointed at me." There it was, the oldest trick in the congressional handbook. Accuse the accuser, drag them into the same mud, then pretend there's no difference. Before Elon could respond, another voice piped up. Adam Schiff, eyes glittering with manufactured outrage, practically lunged into his mic. "This hearing is a distraction. It's a calculated attack by a billionaire who's made it his personal mission to undermine public institutions. He's not exposing corruption. He's attempting to manipulate Congress to serve his political interests. He paused for effect, as if waiting for applause that never came. Elon took a moment, not to think, but to give them just enough rope. Then calmly, with zero flourish, he said, "Yes, I receive subsidies." "You're absolutely right. And with those funds, I built reusable rockets, launched a satellite network connecting the world, and helped trigger an electric vehicle revolution that even your donors now invest in." He turned to Pelosi, not with rage, but with that dangerous calm people wear right before detonating facts. "You, on the other hand, received funding through nonprofit fronts and came out the other end with beachfront homes, a multi-million-dollar stock portfolio, and a mysteriously wealthy extended family." His voice remained quiet, but the words hit like they were delivered through a megaphone strapped to a missile. "I built infrastructure. You built real estate portfolios and called them justice." And just like that, the room tensed, not theatrically, but tangibly. A few lawmakers began avoiding eye contact. One actually adjusted his chair away from Pelosi's row. Shifted, clearly gearing up for another righteous tirade. But even he could feel the current had changed. The usual backup singers weren't joining in. No chorus this time. Elon leaned back, fingers tented. "You want to compare track records? Fine. Mine's in the sky and in people's hands. Yours is in deeds and shell companies." No shouting, no dramatics, just an autopsy being read aloud, with the subject still sitting upright. Sensing the tide shifting, Pelosi did what cornered royalty always does. She lashed out, not with facts, with fury. "This is political theater," she snapped, voice sharpened by decades of learned deflection. "A vendetta staged by a billionaire egomaniac and his MAGA puppeteers. Elon Musk, Donald Trump. Two sides of the same coin, self-serving, populist, delusional." The words were meant to wound, but they landed like paper darts in a hurricane. Because while she hurled slogans, Elon brought fire. Truth has its own acoustics. "You want to call this political?" he said, standing now. Not because he had to, but because gravity itself seemed to ask him to. "Fine, but let's not pretend politics ends at party lines. Let's talk about the uniparty." He tapped his screen. A new list appeared, anonymous ID codes, masked names, but all traceable by the committee. "These are sitting members of Congress," Elon declared, "from both sides, yes, Republicans included, whose affiliated NGOs have received federal funds and distributed them through the same opaque shell structures we've seen exposed today." Gasps, number worse. Shifting chairs, shuffling papers, sudden interest in non-existent phones. "This isn't about left versus right anymore," Elon continued. "This is about them versus United States. Them who built a pipeline from your paychecks to their portfolios. Us who are told to shut up and trust the process, while that process buys beach homes for government staffers' cousins." The screen behind him morphed again, this time into a map, a tangled spiderweb of NGOs, holding companies, foundations, and so-called charities. Each thread annotated with grants, dates, and connections to known legislators. It looked less like philanthropy and more like organized wealth redistribution. Upward. "This," Elon said, pointing, "isn't a safety net. It's a spider's nest. And guess who's trapped in it? You, your children, every small business owner audited while these people funnel federal dollars into climate retreats and equity councils staffed by their college roommates." Someone in the committee chamber stood up and left. Then another. No words, just quiet exits, heads down. A few aides leaned in to whisper urgently into the ears of their bosses, some of whom looked visibly paler than they had an hour ago. Elon wasn't done. "This hearing may have started with Pelosi," he said, voice growing firmer now, like a sermon built not for redemption, but for exposure. "But the rot doesn't belong to her alone. She's just the face. The machine behind her? That's the real enemy." He walked toward the map, eyes scanning it like a battlefield. "This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's a budget line. This isn't a scandal. It's a blueprint. And we're not looking at corruption anymore. were staring down a cartel in a suit and tie. Chuck Schumer, seated 2 chairs down from Pelosi, didn't move, didn't speak. For the first time all day, the master of spin had nothing to say. And as Elon returned to his seat, he looked straight at the committee chair. So what's it going to be? Will this end in testimony or accountability? The room didn't erupt. It contracted, like a lung that had just inhaled too much truth. And outside those walls, the public was watching, not a party, but a reckoning. Elon didn't reach for another file. He didn't pull out a folder or a sheaf of documents. He raised one finger. "I'm not here to tell stories," he said, voice low but steady. "I'm here to let them speak for themselves." With a single tap on his tablet, the screen behind him flickered again. This time, not to maps or spreadsheets, but to footage. Pixelated at first, then sharpened by algorithmic cleanup. A grainy conference room, no labels, no filters, just a man in a blazer and a woman with a binder, both leaning over a table. The audio was rough, but Elon's AI-enhanced playback filled in the gaps with near-perfect clarity. "If we move the money through the second NGO and loop it once before the Cyprus account, she's good with a 5-point skim." "5?" the woman asked. She said, "If it's clean, she'll take 5. No questions. It covers consulting and visibility risk." A soft laugh. Classic. She always knew how to build patriotism by the hour. Elon let it run for 7 seconds longer, just long enough to catch the phrase, "Pelosi's people," then paused it. "You wanted a smoking gun," he said, "but I brought the fingerprints too." He turned to the committee and tapped again. This time, a PDF filled the screen, a scan of a document initialed and signed. The header, Strategic Disbursement Agreement, internal only. Below the legalese was a signature, scrawled in looping confidence, Nancy Pelosi. "This document," Elon said, "was provided by a former employee of the NGO shown in the video. It was stored in an off-site server, encrypted under 3 layers of authentication. And that signature," he pointed, "was verified 2 days ago by a federal handwriting specialist whose credentials are available in the attached affidavit." A murmur rippled through the staff benches, but Elon wasn't done. "We also traced the funds because signatures can be denied. But code," he smiled thinly, "code doesn't lie." The screen now showed a chain of blockchain transactions, time-stamped, geolocated, cryptographically immutable. "This address," Elon said, highlighting one node, "is linked to an NGO headquartered in D.C. The destination? A private LLC registered in Delaware. Ownership, layered under 2 trusts and 3 shell entities. Final beneficiary? A consulting firm headquartered in Palo Alto. Primary contact on file, Alexandra Pelosi." He turned slowly, deliberately. Her daughter. The silence in the room wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. The kind of quiet that happens when reality crashes through ideology like a wrecking ball through stained glass. The chair cleared his throat. "Congresswoman Pelosi," he said gently, "do you wish to respond?" But the woman who had once ruled the House with an iron gavel didn't speak. She didn't blink. She sat statue still, her jaw tight, her gaze locked somewhere above Elon's shoulder, as if willing the ceiling to fall in before the truth settled into the bones of her legacy. A murmur too soft for the official transcript curled up from one of the Republican aides. "Game over." Outside, the press pool had already begun typing. Inside, staffers looked at one another with the expression of people who'd just witnessed a myth die in real time. And Elon? He simply adjusted his tie. No gloat, no grin. Just this. The question is no longer if it happened. It's who helped make sure it did. The morning after the hearing, the world didn't wake up. It sat bolt upright like it had been slapped by truth. NGO scam, Pelosi unmasked, Uniparty leaks. They weren't trending. They were dominating. Cable networks ran split screens of Elon Musk walking out of the chamber and Nancy Pelosi sitting frozen in it. European tabloids dubbed it the fall of Madam Speaker. Chinese state media ran the hearing uncut. For educational purposes, they claimed. And the DOJ? They weren't interested in punditry. They issued a press release at 7:03 a.m. A special investigation has been opened into 9 federally funded NGOs with financial and operational links to former Speaker Nancy Pelosi and affiliated individuals. By 10 a.m., a black SUV convoy rolled up to the offices of the Pelosi Foundation. FBI agents went in. Boxes came out, hard drives, ledgers, off-books records, even a framed Nonprofit of the Year certificate that now felt like a participation trophy from the dark arts. Every NGO flagged in the investigation had its assets frozen. International wire routes were shut down faster than Pelosi's press team could locate a crisis PR firm that hadn't also taken her money. And then came the press release. Short, scripted, and insultingly transparent. Citing health reasons, Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi has submitted her resignation, effective immediately. What followed wasn't resignation. It was dismantling. Her immunity was stripped by unanimous vote. The same chamber that once stood at attention when she entered now voted to put her under oath. The House Ethics Committee released a draft recommendation with enough felony-level keywords to crash a DOJ keyword tracker. Money laundering, tax evasion, abuse of authority, federal fund misappropriation. But the cherry? Leaked internal emails showed Pelosi's post-retirement power map, a plan to install family members in satellite nonprofits to continue influence laundering from the shadows. She wasn't planning an exit. She was planning a dynasty. Longtime allies began quietly exiting stage left. Maxine Waters ghosted her donors. Adam Schiff suspended his re-election campaign to focus on legal clarity. Chuck Schumer? No tweets, no camera time. Just a well-timed trip to visit constituents in Montana. Fun fact, Chuck has no constituents in Montana. Meanwhile, Elon turned down every major interview request. Fox, the New York Times, even Joe Rogan. He posted only once. I didn't bring down a person. I just pulled back the curtain. What you saw behind it was already broken. By the end of the week, Congress had approved a motion to escalate the case from ethics hearing to criminal trial. The presiding federal judge issued a travel ban on Pelosi and 4 members of her financial network. Early evidence linked a shell corporation in Belize, a hillside villa in Italy, and a shadow banking account in Qatar, all sourced from operational expenses of NGOs that had promised community wellness through environmental healing. The American people had seen enough eco-healing for one fiscal year. And then came the image, iconic, burned into every Sunday recap and political podcast thumbnail. Pelosi, seated alone, in front of a DOJ-labeled binder marked grand jury material. No lipstick, no scarf, no pearls, just sweat and silence. Outside, protesters marched with signs that read, "Indict the Uniparty, return the money, return the power." NGO, not getting out, and then, quiet, not from suppression, from saturation. The camera cut to a tower. Elon stood alone, gazing out at Capitol Hill like a surgeon after closing up a wound. He pressed a button on his comms link, speaking to someone on the other end. Still unnamed, still unseen. That was just one branch. The roots go deeper than anyone's guessed. The screen went black. Then came the final words. This isn't the end. Just the end of pretending.